I'm just gonna start it. But yeah, no, I did not realize the game was on, but it's on in the background. So just in case, just be forewarned. But Columbus, I think he got stuck in the cath lab. So he'll
Okay.
try to come on if he gets free. But man, thanks for coming back, bruh.
Yeah, man. Glad to be here, man. Good to see you fellas again. I
Good.
was I'm pretty sure Isaac looks younger than he did when we were in college.
That's crazy. You
I
know,
don't
Yeah.
know what to say to that.
no gray hair. I don't get it.
Just the thinning hair. If I could get rid of that,
Hey.
I'd rather look older and have all the hair everywhere I wanted than this young face.
Like what? Like what's your secret, Fred? Because you don't look like you were balding at all. Like it's just good genes, huh?
Hey, I've been lucky so far.
Yeah.
I'll take. I don't know. If I knew, I could probably sell it.
Yeah, you could. You could.
I wish I knew, man, because the struggle was real before I decided to give it up. But it's all good. I think bald is good. So, but man, listen, thank you for coming back, Fred and I. I don't know if you know this, Isaac. Fred and I were at a conference earlier this year, the Winning Circle conference with Myron, his conference in Atlanta, and I I think Fred and I knew each other through that small group from the Winning Circle, and he was our leader. And so I think we've known each other for a couple of years now. This is the first time we actually met in person. And so,
Mhm.
you just like, hey, what's going on, man? How you doing? Nice to meet you. And in person, and I could kind of tell, like something in his eyes looked like something was weighing on him. And I just said, man, like, how are you really doing? He said, man, honestly, I'm recovering right now from a porn addiction. I'm in therapy. And that blew my mind. I'm like, wow, like that was so brave of you to say that and be transparent in that moment. I've often wondered throughout the months how that was going with
Mhm.
you. And then we connected recently. You were telling me how you got free from it. And this is such an important topic for men. I don't think any of us are impervious to it. I think all of us have dealt with some type of porn addiction or affiliation. No one is immune. And so I wanted to hear from you, like your journey, why you decided to get treatment, and what worked for you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for having the sensitivity to go one step further and ask how you're really doing. I think we all, on a day-to-day basis, we meet people, what's going on, how you doing, whatever, and we even sometimes when we can perceive that, it's not all good with them, we kind of just let it ride. We don't want to intrude. We don't want to stick our nose in other people's business. But one thing I appreciate about Myron is creating a space where intrusion is part of the protocol, right?
Hmm.
We're not there. We're there to set men free in every regard, and so that was certainly a safe place. I think the challenge can be that for many of us, we don't either have a place where we can exercise that or don't feel like we have the permission to do that with other men around us. And so I want to thank you for that because obviously it gave me the opportunity to share and it led to us being here to have this conversation tonight. So I want to salute you for that. It might just be the doctor in you, the Hippocratic oath. I don't know, but you know,
Train listener. Yes, yes.
yeah.
I did want to, because Isaac and Myron clowned me the last time we were on with him because I was telling the story about our early exposure to porn. I think Isaac and we probably discovered around the same time, hanging out.
I don't know why you keep bringing this up.
I mean, I'm just saying, like,
I didn't
this.
like it when Myron brought it up, and I don't like it now.
I didn't say playing in the woods. I just said we
Well,
discovered it, right?
all right.
And
Continue.
but studies show that guys that are exposed to porn under 10, tend to become addicted. So I'm wondering if that was your experience or not.
It was. It wasn't direct. So there were two first times, I guess, kind of. And so my mother used to work at she used to manage a retirement facility for seniors.
Mhm.
And a lot of people don't know this about me, but my mother homeschooled us,
Mm.
myself and my three siblings, the entire way through. So all 12 years I was homeschooled.
Wow.
So when she was managing that facility, she had an office, and in the offshoot of the office, there was like an apartment, which she turned into a schoolroom for us. And then on the other side of the office was a huge like event room, banquet hall, whatever you want to call it, whatever, like a little adjoining kitchen and things like that. And so we would go in there sometimes and play during recess or after school or whatever until my dad came to get us. And one time, because she was the first one to manage it right after it had been opened. And so one time, as kids do, we're up and playing around and exploring stuff and sticking our head in places that don't belong. And on top of the counter in the kitchen was a nudie mag.
Mm.
And to this day,
Mm.
I'm 43 years old. I was seven at the time. 43 years later, I was 7 years old at the time. I can remember what that photo was of that girl who
Mm.
was scantily clad. And I remember the feeling that I got, the thrill that shot through me. I knew
Mm.
instantly, this is not normal. This is not
Mm.
really something that I should be looking at with my parents around, right? So a couple of times I went up there and because, if you have siblings, you know that they're always going to be the type to tattle. And in this case, they didn't tattle on me. They just, oh, mom, I found this thing. And so my mom explained to me, oh, this is, pictures of naked ladies. We don't look at this or whatever. Fast forward 3 years later, and I came across a stash of videos. Um,
Did
and
you find
that
these?
be,
Did you find these in the woods? Like, where did you find it? You came across a stat like.
I'm not going to disclose where I found them,
Okay. Okay.
to protect the innocent.
Gotcha.
But what I will say is that I had consistent access to them.
Mm. Gotcha.
And so a combination of magazines, and it started with magazines and later on it was videos. And so that was just a lifelong addiction, right? A lifelong pursuit and exposure and experience with porn. And for years, I, like, many other guys, tried to swear off of it, said I don't need it, whatever the case may be. Thought when every time I had a girlfriend, I won't need that or whatever, or when I get married, I won't need that or whatever the case may be. And it was always an uphill battle, always something that I struggled with. Might be a week, stay away, couple weeks, maybe, and then right back to it. And never really understanding why and wrestling with that, especially being a man of faith, Christian, you have all of the teachings that tell you this is not what you're supposed to be doing. Lust is bad, all of these things. So you repent, they have the weekly revival or the yearly revival. You go down and you repent, Lord, just help me to give it up. And then that night, if not that week, you're right back to it. And you can't figure out why. And year after year, every year my birthday, this will be the last year I'm giving it up. Come on, man, I'm 21. I don't need that anymore. Come on, man, I'm 30. Come on, man, I'm 40, right? 40. And so consistently, and it's this weakness that you feel like you're just kind of wrestling with, you're hiding. Um, and I'd shared with men before, this is my struggle. I think I shared it in the group, when I was coaching the guys, like I understood the struggle, whatever. But I never really had come to the point where I had eventually gotten to the point where I just didn't believe that it was possible to really give it up. Not really. We hear that, God can heal you of anything and the victory is yours. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's easier said than done. And like I said, when I got married, I really believed that, be getting it on a regular basis. Well, I won't need that anymore, right? And lo and behold, and I had forgotten about this until my wife and I were talking about it, but lo and behold, in the first year of our marriage, my wife caught me, right?
Wow.
Watching, she saw the little stash. And so I ended up throwing that stash away and, whatever, I'm good, right? But we got married in 2010. So the internet was around, but it wasn't popping, right? It started, and that's when when that access came, and it no longer had to be about the sneaking out and going to the video store and things of that nature, and now you could basically get it anytime you wanted, that's when it really started to affect my marriage and things of that nature.
Mm,
And we can go deeper into how that actually all happened, but it came to a head several years ago when again she caught me. And the interesting thing is that she reached out to Myron directly, sent him a message and said, I don't know what to do, you know. And then she told me that she had done it. And I
mm.
tried to pretend I wasn't pissed, but I was, rat me out to my boy, like,
Right.
but she didn't know what else to do. And
She
at
knew
that
that she knew
time,
that that was he had the same struggle, and so she probably felt like he was the right person to come to.
yeah, I mean, Myron at that time, especially in our faith community, is probably the only person that I know that's ever publicly admitted to having dealt with and overcome this issue, right?
Mm,
Which is both a kudos to him and kind of a sad statement because the statistics tell us beyond a shadow of a doubt that greater than 60% of men in the church struggle with this issue, that some 80 to 90% of men watch it at least semi-regularly, engage in porn semi-regularly, and that there's a higher degree of pastors and people in leadership that deal with it
mhm.
than anyone else. So there's a lot of a cover up going on. And I have compassion for understanding why that is. It's just sad that we have not created an environment where both leaders and members can get free of that, in that regard. So,
I think
but
part of the problem is that there's no one's asking why.
right, right.
Everybody's
Well,
just looking at the act and condemning it, but no one's going deeper and saying, well, why?
100%. And we can get into a little bit of what I've discovered about the why, both why it's happening and why we're not getting clean.
Mm,
Um, Especially as men of faith who claim to believe in God, who are spiritual, and in many cases, most cases, I would say, desperately want
mhm.
to be, clean and live upright lives. But you're carrying this secret, this burden, and it can be definitely overwhelming.
Yeah. No, I mean,
So yeah,
mhm.
my question is, if you allow me to jump in here, what
Yeah.
was the, how did you know it was an addiction, not just an attraction? Were there, was it showing up negatively? Were there negative results in your life, your loved ones that you could feel and see?
So I've used the word addiction. I have my therapist who has told me that he doesn't rate my level of involvement at the level of addiction only because
Hmm.
when you are deeply addicted, there are catastrophic consequences that occur, right? At that point, you're non-functioning, right? It becomes the primary driver in your life, right? So I never got to that point. I just couldn't stop doing it. I just couldn't stop indulging in the habit of it, right? And I taken tests to kind of to address that. And so I thought of it, okay, well, I'm not really addicted, but that almost didn't help because the idea that you should just be able to leave it alone whenever you want to, but you can't leave it alone is confusing. And at some point, you're just not even sure, it becomes debilitating in this way. The effects that it had, to answer your question, Isaac, was that for one, it affected my marriage in that my wife felt as most wives do when their husband is suffering from this sort of addiction, is that they blame themselves. They are made to be highly insecure. They're wondering what's wrong with them, right? So it can cause anything from body issues to depression, um, any of those types of issues. It created a lot of tension between us and our intimacy, our ability to be able to connect on that level, even to the point where my wife told me years later that when I touched her, it felt like rape, right?
Mm, mm. Wow.
And
Wow.
that was extremely difficult for me to hear and to be able to process.
Mm,
And over
mm,
time, I had to be able to accept that was her experience. I
mm,
didn't feel as though I was being there, but she would say, you were just rough and you were, and part of that is just absorbing all of the ways that people interact in porn, which is artificial, which is definitely violent in some cases to that regard. Yes.
I mean, I'm curious as to why he thought you did not have an addiction, because usually addiction is defined by doing something and not being able to stop, even despite the negative consequences that occur from it.
Mm,
And oftentimes in addiction, because of that dopamine hit, right, that happens, then you become desensitized, you get down regulation of your receptor, and you need more stimulation in order to get that same feeling. That is addiction. That's a
mm,
physiologic addiction, right? And so
mhm.
I'm curious, did you find yourself needing more? Like, was it just this one type of porn? Did you have to ratchet it up to get the same high that you were feeling? Because that is addiction.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's one of the reasons why I still use that word for
Hmm.
my condition. I don't make the distinction, even though there are levels to it,
Sure.
right? Um, if you think about it, there's a difference between cocaine and crack, even though they're fundamentally made from the same
Hmm.
drug. But the way that they hit people affect people differently, and the behaviors. So you can function on cocaine,
Hmm.
and depending on how much money you have, you might be able to function on crack, as Whitney Houston said, right? But the fact of the matter is,
Crack is
the
whack.
habit is a habit, and the detriment to your health is the same, right? You can still OD. It can still put you in compromising positions. And so that's why I don't really make that distinction when I'm talking about it. I still use the word addiction. But I know people that, they couldn't stop doing at their job, right? So
Mm.
that ability to be able to regulate your behavior in the proper context, right?
Yeah.
For me, I wasn't on my phone whenever, whenever. I was very careful about segregating it from my children and my wife and my family, hiding it. I was in on incognito mode in every way possible, right?
Hmm.
And so, and I'm not saying that to take credit for it, but just to make the distinction that there is a level that you can get to where it's completely out of control. You have to look at it any chance you get where you're sneaking whatever. If you're at the grocery store and so I mean, having been in the community of men, there are many stories that I've heard about, the different levels that it can get to. There may be guys
Yeah,
who listen to this who are at that point, you know.
yeah, and I think that's very worth in this discussion separating out is that
Mhm.
there are levels you could be actually raping the person your partner due to porn. You could be actually watching porn at work and it affecting your job status. You could be giving up things in your life for the sake of porn, and that is a next layer of addiction that if, like you said, if someone is listening and you've got those results in your life, seek a professional.
Hmm. Hmm.
100%.
But the other thing too, with what you're saying, well, Fred, is that you just like there. I had a patient who was like crazy alcoholic, crazy, right? He drank consistently. I had to operate on him. I even had to give him alcohol after the surgery so he would not go in detox, right? So, but he was functional. He could work. And what you're describing is you were still very functional. You were a high functioning man that could kind of figure this thing out. It doesn't necessarily take away from the effects it was having on you and your intimacy. And that's certainly something I want you to dive into a little bit more about how
Mhm.
it was affecting your intimacy. Were you even having any performance issues? Because studies have shown that men who habitually watch porn and masturbate to it,
Mhm.
you are so desensitized that sometimes you can't even climax because you're so used to this overstimulation that you're getting from porn that
Yeah.
just the normal stuff doesn't do it for you anymore.
Right.
So Q,
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna stay on this volume because I think there's a vast difference between the level of porn that men are actually undertaking. So when you say
Yep.
habitually engage in porn, what are we
Every
talking
day.
about? Are we
I
talking
mean,
every day? Okay.
daily.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, daily, maybe skipping a day, maybe skipping a day here or there. The where it is a conscious effort not to do it for that day or 2 days or whatever the case may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it just what I've learned in recovery is there's a way of looking at it is that it is when you create a coping mechanism that becomes a corrupted lifestyle, right? And in essence, it was a part of my lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was how I calmed down in the evening. It was how I dealt with stress. It was how I escaped. It was a form of self-care,
Mm-hmm.
in essence.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it also was very difficult to be able to let go because it served a functional purpose in helping me to function,
Mm-hmm.
right?
But it
And the
also
belief,
masked, what did it mask though for you though? Because you're medicating, that means you're not actually dealing with some root causes.
yeah,
And
100%.
yeah, so what did you discover were your whys or your root causes? Like what was missing? What was that feeling the gap with, with the porn? What was that?
So for me, because I've been in the coaching space for a long time, I've done a fair amount of work, deep work on myself. There were some things that I had been working on that I actually worked through. The problem was, and I'm gonna answer your question, but the problem was that the behavior that I had used all this time still lingered. So I had addressed more of the root causes, which actually allowed me to be able to get clean. I don't want to say more easily, but it was a lot more efficient. It was easier for me to lock in and be more committed to it,
Mm,
which can be a challenge because if you're trying to get clean and you're trying to deal with all the work that comes along with it, that stuff digs up stuff that
mm,
causes you or triggers you. So it makes it more difficult to go through that cycle. And so I think that part of it is that a lot of times what we want to do in the church is we want to tell people to deal with the symptom, right? The addiction is the symptom of the pain. What we learned in recovery is that for men particularly, all sexual addiction is really rage.
hmm,
And at the core of it is a wound. And it's always, almost always, a father wound. It is
mm,
either a father who has abandoned us or a father who was not emotionally present or available. And so it's very interesting when you start to dig into it though, because what it does is it that as a man ties into our own belief about our own self-worth and our own identity.
mhm,
And so what we're constantly doing is we're constantly being challenged with who we are internally, identity-wise. And so if you're always coming up wanting, you're going to find ways to medicate it. Now, I also want to highlight this. This this issue is present in many men. Not every man is going to be a prime candidate for sexual addiction, right?
mhm,
There are many other addictions, alcoholism, gambling. For some men, the sexual addiction comes up in the form of womanizing, sleeping with multiple women, risky sexual behaviors. It can include porn, but it can go so far beyond that. To kind of talk about what Isaac was talking about, the different levels and the volume. Like for
mhm,
some guys, porn isn't even enough. They've got to go and act out with people in extremely risky or illicit behaviors.
mhm,
So those types of things are things that show up. But these wounds are deep. They have been triggered from the time that we were young. And so once we encounter porn, because porn is so viscerally stimulating, they say that the first time you watch porn, your brain is changed forever.
wow. Wow, I can believe that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so these images, like I said, I can still remember the very first image that I ever saw. It lives in my brain. It probably will be there forever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the emotional charge that you get that comes along with it, right? I've said this in group conversations with other men, and they've echoed the same sentiment. The first time that you experience it, you feel lucky.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
feel like you've been given something so special, and
Hmm.
it makes you feel special. And the thing about it is, if you ask many men who have, well, any man who's ever been intimate with a woman, that intimacy for any semi-healthy male will make you feel that way.
Hmm.
She's showing you parts of her that no one else gets to see. She touches you in a way that no one touches you. She allows you to experience her in a way that no one else has experienced her. And that feeling is not one that men get to experience very often,
Hmm.
right? You think about why we play sports for the trophies.
Hmm.
There's the perfect example. We've all been playing basketball with the dribbling in the air, or just shoot phase. We do the countdown, 3, 2, 1. What do? We shoot, we score, and then what do you hear?
Crowd. Yeah.
The applause, that validation for who you are. That feeling is what it felt like for me when I first saw that image.
So I'm trying to make the connection between the father wound and the porn addiction. And from what I'm hearing you say is that it's a validating experience, as you're filling in the vacuum of what you're not getting from your dad, that validation of being a man. Nah, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of what I'm tracking. And so you're feeling that with this fake validation of pornography, feeling good about yourself as a man in that way. Is that what you're saying? Is that how it works?
That's very close, very, very close to accurate. I'm trying to think of how to frame it in a way that would generally be understood. I think we have for so long in society held up the value of mothers, right? The mother's nurturing presence, the mother's love, et cetera, et cetera. And we almost put it down that the father is, if not an afterthought, he's a side piece to that,
Mm,
right? Like it's great to have a dad, but if you don't, at least you have your mother and
mhm.
she'll cover it all. But there's a vital role that fathers play. And because, especially in the Black community, there have been so many fathers that have been wounded. When it comes to my father, for instance, he grew up in a broken home. There was a lot of abuse and violence and things like that. He had to raise his own siblings for a long time. He never got to experience that love. He did not have that experience that he could transfer to us
Mm,
from a
mhm,
knowing place. So there were parts of him emotionally that he just didn't have the capacity to pour into, right? And so because of that, you had that sense as a child, but as a child, you think it's your fault. You
mm,
think that you're responsible for doing things to make your parents love you. If I behave wrong, my parents get upset. If I behave well, my parents are approving. And so that's how we start to perceive, because we're children. So we have a very minimalistic understanding of what that means. But in any instance where that occurs, in any instance where we sense where we're reaching out to connect with our father, and our father is not able to in turn connect with us, that creates a deep wound there. There's something that's missing. There's a hole.
It's intimacy. It's intimacy. You're missing that intimacy with your father. Okay.
100%.
I would
Yeah.
think that would be more
But
like
don't
for women. I mean, like your mother. I would think that would be more sort of a mother thing, but you're saying it's a father thing. Okay.
don't we use real sex to fill in that gap as well?
Hmm.
Oh yeah, you can. You can. The thing about porn, why it's so insidious, and especially now that it's online, is because real sex requires real work, right? You have to do something to get it. Now, I mean, we may not all be as handsome as you, Isaac, with the full beard, but if you're if it is not effortless, there is at least something that's required, and the act itself, reality sets in, right? So the thing about porn is that those women are always there doing it exactly the way you want, exactly your preferred angle every single time. They're never going to turn you down. They're never going to leave you wanting, and they're going to tell you how great you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you want it? How do you want it, babe? And so that experience is incredibly addicting because at the end of the day, especially nowadays, you can pretty much see a naked body anywhere, right? It's not just the nudity. It's not just the sexuality. It is that form of validation that you get. It is that artificial idea of being seen and being known. Because if you had a woman who loved you and you would want her to please you in the way that you preferred, right? You would hope that she would know the ways that turned you on and she would do it for you because that's the way. I mean, that's what they want from us, right?
But it's a right. I was gonna say it's a two-way street. Like we're in
Right.
turn
It's
supposed to know
reciprocal.
what they want and try to please them. It's a give and take.
Right. Right. But again, the artificialness of it, when you have those insecurities, when you have those wounds, you're also lacking the capacity to be able to connect on some level emotionally,
Oh yes. Oh
you
yes.
know?
Yeah.
And so that emotional labor is work. It's labor. If I click on www dot whatever, that's the entirety of my contribution to this connection, right? Everything else
Fun.
is incoming.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes it difficult. This is why it's so hard because in our brains are wired to receive that. Now we're wired to crave it. And we can consistently get that. But as you kind of alluded to, Q, one of the challenges is that over time that gets dulled and you have to ramp it up, right?
Mhm.
I mean, as long as I have been consuming this content, I felt like I had reached the end of the internet, you know? You get
Mm.
to a point where you feel like you have literally seen it all, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
to the point where you can go retro if you want and go back, yeah, I remember. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. That's
I saw a meme that said I'm ready for the new season of Pornhub. I, I watched. He said I watched it all. I'm ready for the new season.
listen,
wow.
man,
That's too much porn.
That's a lot. That's a
listen,
lot.
and I'm gonna tell you, well, I'm gonna say this too, because I mean we're having a grown man conversation here.
Yeah.
The thing that was also troubling internally was the way that it has devolved, right? There's stuff out there now that is so demonic, so it is eating away at the fabric of our society in darkness, and we don't even know. There is so much incest
Mm.
now prevalent, right? Things that used to be in the corner, tucked away, like you had to go find that. Now it's front and center. And when I say it is one of the most prevalent aspects pornography right now. I have
Mm.
a book that my therapist recommended, and whether you've been free or not, you need to get this book. It's called The Mind on Sex.
Mm.
It's by Shazar Curry, and he breaks down how he got free of it. It's the best kept secrets about sex, proven ways to quit porn and fix your romance. But he talks about the sex industry, sex trafficking, how insidious it is. You're seeing younger and younger children, right, that are being portrayed in this. There's a lot of
Mm.
abusive situations being fantasized and fetishized.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where I'm consciously trying to wade through this stuff to find the quote unquote normal born, right? And that was at a point where I was realizing, man, I've got kids. It's like I'm looking at this stuff and I felt out of integrity as a father
Mm.
with the things that I was experiencing and seeing this. And so wrestling with that, wrestling with how it was affecting my marriage, wrestling how it was affecting me. I felt like it was affecting me business wise,
Mm,
not being able to focus the level of attention, brain fog, staying up till 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, having to get up at, 6, 7 to go, get the kids ready for the day, and I'm running on 3 hours of sleep. How effective can you be? So
yeah.
all of those things are coming into play. And it came to a head when my wife, she just said, we've got to get help. We got to get therapists or something to deal with the marriage aspect of it.
Mm,
And we ended up hiring marriage coach, a couple, Shannon and Shirley Austin. Shannon's my big
yeah.
brother. I'd known him for years, but
Okay.
reached out to him in that capacity. And they were amazing, took us through this whole process for almost a year. And it was getting somewhat better, right? That was the toughest year of our marriage.
Mm,
And I
mm,
was not sure we were going to make it.
mm,
And I was talking to him one day, and I was just kind of venting frustration, et cetera, et cetera. And I was telling him what was going on. And he was like, why is she acting like this? Whatever the case may be. What do you think that is? What's going on? And then I offhandedly mentioned to him, yeah, so she called me with the porn the other night or whatever. And he was like, wait, what? Record scratch, stop the presses. Look, you need to find a sex therapist right now. You need to find a sexual, um, Sexaholics Anonymous group, SA group immediately,
wow.
and find you a meeting as soon as possible.
Wow. Wow.
And I got off the phone with him immediately. And this is the one thing that I
Mm,
think was a saving grace for me was my willingness to submit to leadership from someone else that I given that capacity to in my life. And
mhm,
too many of us as men do not have that. We don't have
mhm,
anybody that we're accountable to. We don't have anybody that we are, can check us, can point us in the right direction, and hold our feet to the fire. And he
mhm.
did that for me. And so I did that. Googled a guy. The first guy that came up was a Christian therapist, Black Christian therapist. Reached out to him, set an appointment. Um, I started looking at SA groups, and there was one in my area. I tried to go to that group. Actually, that night that I went, they were off that that one night. But what happened was my therapist pointed me to this group called Conquerors, and it's a group called the Finally Free Fellowship. Actually, they're out of California, but the guys are all over the country. And I joined that group, and that's when I really started to go on this journey of getting clean and basically changing my life. And I say that even in the midst of it, I'm almost a year into it now. But I say that because they tell you that it takes about 90 days to detox your brain
Mm,
from the effects of porn. But then it takes you between 2 to 5 years to become completely clean.
wow. Wow.
And so that's the challenge that most men experience is that because when they said that, I said 2 to 5 years, you
Yeah.
know, I don't know if I can do it, Jesus.
That
But
actually that excuse me for a second because I want
mhm,
to ask you a question about that because that length of time, how does that group deal with failure?
right.
Like how is failure looked at? Like we're all human, we're all going to slip up.
Uh-huh.
No one's perfect. Is that like, oh no, you got to start back from ground zero, or is that built into your healing journey, or how is failure viewed?
Yeah. I want to talk about that because that's actually the most important part of it,
Hmm,
or one of the most important parts of it. We learn in recovery, we are wounded in community. We must be healed in community. And community means family, whatever context it was that you grew up in, right? That's your community. We need community. You cannot do this in isolation. You're
hmm,
not supposed to.
hmm,
Even if you were able to do it in isolation, part of your recovery is to go out and help somebody else get clean.
hmm,
That's part of you being able to be successful at it. And in the group, we have there are between 5 to 7 calls every week, right? So there's always a call available. There's a list of SA groups around the country, actually around the world that meet. So any given time, every 30 minutes, anywhere in the world, you can hop on a Zoom and get in a community of guys,
Wow.
right? And because for many men, that level of temptation is there present for them, being able to get in there and do that and have those conversations, you're seeing how it's affecting the other men, but you're also being held accountable. And other people are walking you through that process. Because one of the things that happens too is that the temptation and the triggers are internal, right? So there
Mhm.
may be external pressures, but you're kind of dealing with that internally. And what's happening is if it's all internal, you're the only one that can wrestle with that. And so the perceptions are off, right? When you're experiencing and you're in your emotions, emotions are just signals of thoughts. They're
Mhm.
not facts.
Mhm.
They're not true, but they feel true. And what most of us have learned to do is to bypass those emotions and go straight to the medication, whatever that is, you
Mhm.
know. And so you never deal with the feelings, you never wrestle with those thoughts, you never actually overcome them, examine them, realize it's not true. This belief that I have about myself, whatever the case may be. And
Mhm.
so when you're in a group on a call with these other men, you can walk through that in real time. Of course, it's always going to be dependent upon your willingness to be transparent, right? To be
Mhm.
fully vulnerable. But when I can say that I've been on some of the most beautiful calls where men have poured out their hearts, and when you hear the pain that so many men have experienced, the loneliness and isolation, it's not just the addiction, right? Because the addiction is the medication, right? It's the
Mhm.
symptom.
Mhm.
And they never get to talk about what they experience and how that feels. And to be in a space where other men can hear you and validate you, and you can hear what other men are going through, and you can in turn validate them, it is an incredibly liberating thing. And it will compel you to come back if you are open to it. And I'm not going to pretend that it's easy for many men to do this because most men do not do this level of emotional work, right? It
Right.
is a challenge to build this muscle internally.
But like,
Yep.
but I mean, like the point I was trying to get at, because I know that there are guys that beat themselves up. They're trying to do the right thing. They fall
Mm,
back into it. That's part of the healing journey, is it not? Like if you,
right.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
right, right. So how is that
Well,
handled? How should someone look at that where they're like, I just can't get it right because the guilt, the shame, just the embarrassment of or the feeling of just letting people down can be so strong. It may prevent people from wanting to be vulnerable or tell their
mhm.
truth, right? And so how is that dealt with in community in a way that is healthy, that doesn't beat somebody up if they slipped up?
So it's overall, I was going to say there's no judgment, but what happens is men kick into action. And this is the one thing about us
Hmm.
as men that is different from women, whereas women may be more emotionally supportive. The men support the emotion, but that's for a separate container. Right now, the key is we need to take action. Go to a meeting, right? Let's call your accountability partner. Every man has assigned an accountability partner, right? Have that conversation with somebody. Call anybody in the group,
Hmm.
right? Oftentimes when somebody says, guys, I messed up, I slipped up, right? Great. Somebody will call, hey, I'm calling you right now, right? And so you have that level of support and accountability, but they're walking you through. So let's watch the game film. What happened? Yeah,
Hmm.
man, my girl was tripping, or my boss was tripping, or whatever the case may be. I was just tired of it, fed up, whatever the case may be. Great. Okay. Where did you not take the proper steps, right? Because there was a certain point where you made a decision. I'm
Hmm.
going to fail, right?
Hmm.
How do we support you in making the right decision the next time, right? So
Right.
you know that. And
Yeah.
so part of it is just knowing that you can get picked up and that you're just stringing together the days, but over time, the more days you string together, the easier it becomes.
Hmm.
And certainly there are guys who fall off after a year or two, right? But part of that is just because you get out of the protocol of community. You get out of the protocol of serving and helping other men. You get out of the protocol of following the different steps that are available to you, recognizing that there are different patterns that we all have, right? Different points of failure that we have allowed to be installed into our lives, right? Points where you're isolation, right? So for better part of a year, I didn't even come into my office after bedtime, right? That was off limits. I had to break that pattern.
Mhm.
So
That's good.
I went out and bought a television. I bought a 60-inch television for our bedroom. We'd never had a TV in our bedroom, right? And I used to come in my room to watch the Warriors games and things like that. And it's on the West Coast, so it's late, but that's an excuse to kind of be up and be in this environment. And so I had to break that,
Mm.
right? So and part of that too was letting my wife see that I was actually actively working towards that, right? That's part of restoring that trust and restoring that bond and that integrity that I had been out of for so many years in our marriage. So I think I answered your question though about how we pick guys up.
No, it is you did because each one of those failures, you watch the tape. I like that. Watch the tape. What happened? Where did you drop off? And so just having that self-awareness now to say,
Mhm,
okay, there's another path I can take when it comes to this point that I'm going to take that I have to develop the muscle memory to do.
mhm.
And over time, hopefully that'll work. So I like that.
Yeah, I want to emphasize the point. Community is so important. I posted this on Facebook a couple of months ago. That if you do not have men in your circle that are willing to fight for your marriage as hard as you are or harder,
Mhm.
you have the wrong circle, right?
Mm.
And when it comes to any aspect of your life, and I don't really care what it is, but if you want to be successful, you need other people around you. You need other men who are going to hold you to that standard, right? Even when you don't want to be held to it.
Mhm.
I've had friends, who have ducked and hid when things got tough in their marriage and they didn't want to be checked on it, right? And they're divorced now
Mhm.
because they made up in their mind, I just don't want to deal with it. But
Mhm.
whenever there have been men around us that we have been able to pour into, they can fight through it, right? You find that you garner that strength from each other. And so the idea that you have to get clean alone is a fallacy. It's not possible unless you're the
That was gonna be
strongest
my
willed person.
that was gonna be my next question too. Like, what did you find that was successful? What were the keys to success for you? What didn't work and what did work?
There are a couple of things that are actually the foundation for my success, and they came before I actually even got into the program. One of the things was that I've been on this journey about understanding who God really is.
Mhm.
One of the things that I learned, especially through recovery, is that one of the reasons why, for men in the church especially, it's such a challenge is because we see God as a vindictive, angry, petty individual.
Mm.
And because of that, it puts us at odds with him when what we really need is to be reconciled to him, because that's when he can show us who we really are to him. We can learn to see ourselves as he sees us. And remember, this is all about a wound. So part of the reason why the father wound is so important is because how we relate to our father is a reflection of how we relate to God.
Mm.
And
Mm.
as I evolved in my understanding of who he was, of who he is,
Mm.
and how he sees us, and how he he has this deep, abiding, never changing love, you realize that he is not ashamed of you or angry at you for your behavior
Mm.
because God designed us. He understands that addiction is actually a failsafe. It's a mechanism that the brain uses to medicate the traumas and the stresses of the world, right? It's a corruption of that mechanism, but dopamine is this thing that motivates us. It It validates us, it drives us. And so when we find these alternative methods of doing it, God's not surprised. He's not, "Oh, look at you just screwed up, the machinery." Like he's not looking at us that way. And very often though, the church looks at it as like it's our responsibility to be able to understand how to operate the machinery of our mind independent of all these other factors, these contributing factors to where we are. It doesn't mean that there's not a capacity to get clean. It doesn't mean that there's not a capacity to find healing. But what we don't do is, one, we don't offer a overwhelmingly accurate assessment of God's position in relativity to our sin, right? We say God hates the sin, loves the sinner, but we don't translate it that way in our minds, right? There are one of the things we learned in recovery, right? So there is what you know, and there's what you believe.
Hmm.
We know, we are taught that God is love,
Hmm.
but we don't believe it.
Hmm.
Because if we believed it, just like a child, when they know that their parent loves them, even if they've done wrong, they will come to their parent
Right.
and they will say, "I'm sorry, I did this." Or even if they can't confess, they'll just come to them because they need their parental presence to soothe them in the midst of what they're going through. We don't do that. What do? We do like Adam did. He hid. We hide from God. We hide from everyone. And what we have done is become experts at hiding it and pretending that it's holiness.
Hmm.
And when we do that, it prevents us from being able to get. So that was one thing that I didn't know this until I got into the program. And I could see for the men who were struggling to get clean, that was a difference for them than it was for me. Because the majority of the men that are in this group are Christians, are believers to some capacity, to some degree. But when you have that belief about God, it makes it very difficult because the difference between guilt and shame is that guilt says, "I've done wrong." Shame says, "I am wrong."
Wrong. Right. Right.
And it's the shame that makes us hide because we say, as who I am as a person, right? And even the language that we talk about, especially as men today, there's a lot of derogatory language about men, right? We are dogs, we are pigs, we are,
Toxic.
right,
Yeah.
toxic. We are, to the point that our very identity is associated with this. And so what do? Now we're engaged in this behavior, which is so based and so degrading, right? And well, what if I love it? What if I love the degradation? What if I love being down there in the muck? Well, I must be a pig then because I love being. And so even if you have this desire somewhere inside of you to get clean, having that ability to be able to navigate out of that is very, very challenging. So having that image of God was liberating. And so it allowed me to be able to accept that, okay, this is what's important. The other thing that helped me was in my very first session with my therapist, he put up a diagram and he described what's called the addiction cycle, right? And so the addiction cycle basically breaks down to, I'm not going to remember everything, but it basically breaks down into a trigger or a stimulus, something that ticks you off, right? And so then it comes to a decision that I'm going to act out, that I'm going to medicate this feeling, right? So it could have happened at 11 o'clock in the morning. And the thought can occur to me, well, that's okay, because I can make it to 11 o'clock at night and then I'll be okay.
Mm.
Because I'm going to be entering this fantasy world where everything is going to be all right. Right. And so then there is you make the decision and then you go into what they call a ritual, right? Because every man has a ritual for dealing with this stuff. It's akin to a drug addict going and got their needles and they've got the rubber band. I don't want to trigger anybody, but they've
Yeah.
got all the materials they need. So they set it up and it's like a doctor surgical. Well, it's very similar in that regard, right? You got whatever you're going to use to be able to get you where you want to go.
Got your tissue, got your lube, you got everything set up.
And, you know, you so you got all the materials. So you're in the addiction cycle, and then you use, and then after that comes the guilt.
Mm.
And then it comes, um, they call it like the bargaining, right? Oh, I'm never going to do this again. I repent. I'm giving up, whatever the case may be. until you get back to the top of the cycle. And then the next trigger hits you and you're back into it again. And you're going through it over and over again. And that visual really helped me to see what it was like.
Mm-hmm.
And then he showed me on the corner, right? What he calls an off ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this off ramp, you can make a decision and you can choose an alternative behavior that allows you to break that cycle. And for the first time, it computed in my brain, oh, it's possible for me to stop this. I don't have to go through the cycle every time. I can take the off ramp. Just like when you're stuck in traffic and you feel like I just got to be here with all the other cars breathing the fumes. But if there's an exit right there that takes you to freedom, that can get you home or wherever you want to be faster, why wouldn't you take that? And so in my brain, I was able to visualize that. And that really, really helped me. So we started to craft what those behaviors are, right? What that exit ramp is, how you can avoid that cycle. And so now it allowed me to be able to realize I have more control over this than I thought I did.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the belief that I couldn't was helping to keep me trapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about community and things like that. There were a number of things that I learned, a lot of revelations about the nature of this particular addiction, why it affects men the way that it does, what those root causes are. We kind of talked some about it being the rage and the father wound and some other things as well. And
Because
then the community.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just and then the community. Again, I can't reiterate enough that when you hear these stories of other men, when you hear that affirmation, and yeah, very similar to when we were in the winning circle group together, Q, we were a community of men who were sharing these struggles and challenges and overcoming, you know, week after week. And it's a powerful experience because you're not alone. And that sense of belonging, not to this group of degenerates, but to these men who are actually victors and overcoming, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not only aspirational, it is operational, I guess would be a good way to
Yeah,
put it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Man, that's a lot. I think if I'm trying to synthesize all of it, like we 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 behave to the level of our beliefs, what we believe in ourselves, right? And if we are in alignment with God and what He says about us, who we are, and how He relates to us,
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
that should change our belief system to hopefully change what we think about ourselves and how we operate. The other thing is self-awareness, knowing your patterns, knowing your triggers, knowing the cycle, and knowing how to get on an off ramp,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And then, this is something that's done in isolation. And isolation is the source of depression, it's the source of suicide, it's the source of
Mhm.
addictions. And so being in community gets you out of that space. And those are, I guess, the key takeaway points to how you found success and how others can find success as well.
Yeah, it is possible for everyone. I mean, I've seen guys in the group who've been through some incredible stuff. Abuse,
Hmm.
have been abusive, have had, their own level of illicit, even criminal consequences for what they've done, but have come out on the other side. It's
Hmm.
possible because there are people that are going to walk along beside you to be able to help you to get there. You don't have to do it alone. And it's so worth it. The challenge I know for so many men is that it doesn't feel possible. I mean, it's not a reality. Even even a podcast like this, where there are conversations like this that are happening, it just doesn't exist for the most part. And there's also, it's come to the point where in society where it's almost accepted, right? It's being promoted. We talk about it casually. Oh, I ain't, gonna, and it's that's probably the most dangerous part about it because when it becomes normalized, now what you're doing, I mean, imagine if smoking crack became normal, right?
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, and it was legalized and encouraged and, so,
I
and
think I think I think Isaac was onto something when he was talking about levels, because you
Mhm.
know we're talking about porn addiction,
Yeah.
and Isaac, you were kind of alluding to, is there some level where it's not a problem? At one point, is it a problem? It's just the watching a porn an issue in general. I guess
Mhm.
that's a topic for discussion. But
I mean,
you know,
I think it's a dangerous topic because porn is like sugar. Just a little bit of it sends you down a path.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
can you imagine saying to someone, sugar's okay, a little bit? I mean, it's got to come with an asterisk,
mhm,
but don't do it this way, or watch it, or monitor, or limit, or and so
mhm,
it gets real yes, a little bit of porn is not going to make you an addict, and is not going to ruin your marriage. But I'd never say that to somebody, because now, yeah, I don't want you to ever think I'm endorsing it. That is on you. If you are doing this, know that a little bit of porn could take you places you don't want to be, and where you and
Well,
your partner don't want to be. And so I shy away from putting labels on it that make it okay.
mhm,
let me use your analogy and define it this way, right? Sugar is a naturally occurring phenomenon,
mhm,
but sugar, the way that we consume it, is dangerous because of the way it's processed. It's
mhm,
not
Right.
actually natural. White sugar on your in your kitchen is not natural.
right.
It doesn't occur that way, right? Porn, when you're watching it, is just sex, right?
Mhm,
But it's not real. It's been processed to simulate a certain thing in a certain situation or certain environment. And it's the processing, it's the way that it's processed that makes it dangerous, because
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with sex. But when you take it out of the proper context and put it in this environment, yeah, even a little bit will hurt you.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Even a
And
little bit will hurt you.
and the biggest asterisk for me is the biggest fear, harm, is the stuff we don't know about, that porn does. If when you introduce porn at any level, and you're in a committed relationship where you're intimate, you're putting at risk those beautiful moments
mhm,
in a way that you don't know. We don't know, because Fred, in the very beginning, you talked about you coming across, you entering the bedroom a little aggressive.
Mhm.
Um, I have no idea if that came from porn or not, but it could. You think
Right.
it did. The fact that it could, I don't want to do anything to risk that those beautiful moments with these with this lovely lady, that
mhm,
my partner. You don't want to do
Right.
that. It's
mhm.
just too magical of a moment for you to screw it up. So uh
And no, you make a great point. And to that point, right, one of the things that also gets misunderstood is sex itself, right?
Yes.
We
Yes.
come to, again, take your analogy. We come to see sugar as white kernels, these white grains that come in a bag, right? And not this chemical reaction that happens occurring naturally in nature. And it has a way that it's supposed to interact with your body and create this certain outcome, right? It's not meant to sit in your body and turn into your gut, right? It's not meant
Right.
to just one of the things about sugar is that because it hits the glycogen levels, right? You get these glycogen hits, spikes, and those spikes, every time you hit a spike, it shortens your life, right?
Mhm.
Because
Yep.
it's causing this adverse reaction in your body. Well, that's what happens with porn,
Mhm.
because you are slowly starting to have this corrupted idea of what sex actually
Yeah.
is,
Talk
and
about
it turns it all in its head.
it.
Sex is this amazing thing that happens between a man and a woman, a husband and a wife, as God was designed it to be, right? It can happen between anyone in any context, anywhere. But anytime it happens outside of the way that it was supposed to be, it will subvert the intention. It will subvert the connection. It
Mhm.
will it will rot you from the inside out. And I
Mm.
having experienced it for 40 years, right? You know, and when I went into recovery, when they tell you that the first time you watch it, it changes your brain forever. Anything that will change you instantly simply by experiencing it, and you have no idea what that's going to do to your brain, right? But it can send you down any path. I mean, that's what happened with crack. That's why crack became so successful, because one hit and it was over.
Yep, 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 yep. I think that the we're hitting the nail on the head when you look at how artificial porn is and how we think, that's our view of sex. That's how we're educated. It turns into a performance. You're trying to replicate the things that you see. You want her to do the things that you're seeing. It just becomes the show.
Yeah.
And instead of this warm, intimate connection where two people are communicating in a way that only they can, it really skews. So it's almost like, did you even find yourself having to even relearn what sex was, what real intimacy was with your wife after years of this indoctrination of what sex looked like?
Yeah. In many ways, I'm still discovering new ways that I'm being set free from it
Mhm.
all as my youngest comes in.
All right.
You ready for bed? Okay, I'll be up in a
About
second.
that time.
There you go. Mm,
Oh.
I see you in the morning. Okay, I'll be up in a second. There, there's so many things that are still being unpacked.
Yeah.
Every week, every month, realizing. I think the one thing I would say probably the most is the capacity that's been unlocked is my capacity to be more present with her, to
Yes.
experience that, right? I think most guys are familiar with the concept of the highlight reel.
Mhm.
Like sometimes you just got to go in your mind and like, oh yeah, I remember, such and such, right? Well, when you've consumed porn
Mm.
for any number of years, your highlight reel is, you know, and
Unattainable? Is that where you're going?
oh no. It's I mean, you can literally in your mind, you're going to these, that's my favorite scene, that's my favorite actress, that's my favorite
Mm,
position, that's my favorite thing. And
mm,
so it's very easy for you not to be fully present with her. And I think part of
Yes.
that, what my wife
Yeah.
was, experiencing, sadly, was me not being fully engaged with her, who
Right.
was there in the room with me,
Mhm.
but with some other image or some other thought or whatever the case may be. And that's not fair to her, you
No.
know? That is abusive. That is violent in some regard. It's
Mhm.
selfish,
Mhm.
and to be able part of that the beauty of that experience, like you're talking about, Isaac, is the capacity to be able to love a person physically the way that they need to be in that moment.
Mhm.
Because for women, it's not always the same. It's not always all right, paint by the numbers.
Mhm.
There's adjustments that need to be made. There is a level of care that you are required to give as a man. And that vigor, that care, that intensity, that tenderness, you can miss all of that if you just running through the motions, if you're just like, and so being able to do that now at a greater degree is
Mhm.
really helpful. I know that it's more rewarding for her, and it's more rewarding for me to know that she can enjoy and engage in that at that level. Because a lot of the things, go ahead.
I was gonna say, which is the other unknown effect of porn, which is what does your partner feel about it? And yeah, there are probably examples of partners totally cool with it. They're fine. I mean, you see people that are progressive and free, and but most, I don't want to say most, but are you really gonna get your partner's true feelings, how it affects her emotionally? Is she really gonna come out? A lot of times, probably not. And so again, here you're playing with fire
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Well,
with her emotions and her effect. And so not only are you potentially showing up different, aggressive, or whatever in bed, she might be showing up a little nervous.
Guarded,
And so
not
guarded.
not
Yeah,
free.
because yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's her insecurity, it's her whatever it is, but at the end of the day, it's affecting your moment.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
if
I can tell
anything, this
you,
podcast is about get into those moments. That's what we do. We got to get to those
We
moments.
like
And when we
those
get there, it's
moments.
good.
Gotta get to the bag, bro.
Right,
Yeah,
but
right.
I do like I love where this is going because it's not just about rejecting something. It's about wanting something more, reaching for
Mhm.
something more. And what we're talking about is that more,
That's
that
it.
pot of
That's
gold
it.
that we've been missing out on, because we've been distracted, we've been skewed about what our views of intimacy and sex are. And so just briefly talk about what that more is, like just how you have found that as maybe even a motivating factor to continue on this path.
Again, I'm still uncovering and unpacking things. I've had
Mm,
the best year in my business ever this
mm,
year.
mm.
I don't think it's unrelated, you
No,
know,
no. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
The level of focus, the level of clarity. One of the hidden factors, I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, Q. One of the hidden factors when you're married is that your relationship, your wife directly affects everything that you do,
Talk
right?
about it. Yep.
If
Yep.
stuff ain't right with me and my wife, I'm off,
Yep.
right? And I just don't function the same. I'm
Yep.
trying to figure that out, 3, 4 days. Like we gotta figure this thing out because I need to be back on my square. So
Mhm.
the fact that I was making this move and that level of trust and that level of dependability, right? And the connection could be returning, right? That means that, and again, also, I'm not hiding anything. You,
Yes. Yes.
when you're working, always keeping one hand tucked behind the back,
That's work.
you're not,
That's work.
it's work, bro. You know what I'm saying? And so
Mm.
I don't know how guys, they run game, they got 2 and 3.
Yeah.
I had I probably had hundreds online that
Yeah.
weren't real, and that was too much for me, right?
Right.
It was
Right.
so being able to tap into that is really, really important. And more is possible. The thing about it is, I always say this, you can never dream a dream bigger than the dream God dreams for you. We don't know what that more entails,
Yep.
but if it was just a little more, it would be better than what you got. And the lie that addiction tells you that I believed for so long was that I need it. I can't get by without it. I'm not gonna let this go. Right?
Mm.
Good.
Wow. Hmm.
Right? But the real thing is 10, 100, 1,000 times better. And
Wow.
what's possible beyond that. And so being able to tap into that, has been an incredible blessing. And I have to say that I think I was blessed. I don't want to use the word lucky, but in some regards, because of I was not to the degree that I know so many other men are and have been. There's this narrative out there, some kind of like, when you're drinking, like you can't hold your liquor. Well, kind of like, well, you can't hold your point. You're weak, Bro,
Yeah.
look, let me tell you something. All right. You think that if there is a thing that you cannot let go of, right?
Mhm.
You cannot put it down because if you don't, you won't function. That's the weakness,
Mhm.
right? I was a weak man in that regard. Once a week, but now I'm strong. I am getting stronger every day. And I'm not sitting here saying like, I'm perfect or I have, conquered everything. But it is my intention with God's grace. And this is part of the reason why I'm speaking out. It's a it's a scary thing to tell people that you've been dealing with this situation when you don't know how people are going to judge you,
Right.
right? What I'm choosing is two things: the courage that if I speak out, there will be someone else who will hear this and know that it's possible for them and they need to be able to take those steps
Yes.
involved. And the second part of it is that it puts me on blast because as a leader in the position that I'm at, I'm holding myself accountable.
Yep.
At any point, somebody can walk up to me and say, "Yeah, but are you still on?" And "Yep, I'm still." So if anything, if a healthy level of fear, I want to be able to respond to somebody and say, "Yep, year and counting. Yep, 2 years and counting. Yep." And to be that for other people, not because I'm living my life for them, but because in everything, man. That we're called to a higher level of accountability. To him, much is given, much is required. And I would flip that. To him, much is required, much is given. So
Mm-hmm.
if I can subject myself to what is required, then I can achieve. When we talk the more, I can achieve and be given so much more to be able to handle and to manage. And so that's the caveat that I'm living with, and I believe that God is directing, in grace through that whole process.
Man, that's a beautiful story, bro. That's a
Yeah,
beautiful
it's
story.
good, man.
Thank you for sharing and being so open and transparent with your struggle and how you overcome. I know it's going to bless someone who's listening to this, who's going through the same thing. So there's more out there, that I guess that's the lesson. There's more, you got to give up something to gain something, right? And so with anything. So thank you for that lesson, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate your willingness to have the conversation. Not everybody's willing to do that, but I am hopeful that there are men out there, and I'll leave with you. I'll send you, make sure you have the link to the Finally Free fellowship, so men can join that. There's a Signal group that you can join,
Nice.
and there's a Conquerors group that goes through a curriculum that helps walk you through this. So there's a group that studies every week and does this, and then there's other subsequent curriculum as well, because it's not just getting clean, but it's about there's more to it, right? How can you now be on the warpath to help set other men free? And really, there is no passive side on this, right? You can't sit on the sidelines, because if I have two daughters, I'm fighting because there's a guy out there that one day may date my daughter, one of my daughters, and is going to be exposed to this. It's going to be challenged by this. I'm going through this for my son, right?
Mm.
We have these influences that are out there. And so there are also resources to be able to support you in being stronger as a man, to being healthier and more powerful in the ways we were designed to be.
Yeah, this is good. If you send those to me, I will put that in the description so guys can get those links to those important groups. So I appreciate your
100%.
time, man.
Yeah,
Um,
Yeah,
man,
good. Thank you.
yes, thank you. We'll have to do it again, man.
for sure. For
All
sure.
right. All
Appreciate you
right.
guys.
Have a good evening.
All right.